So in case you haven't noticed, I'm kind of a fan of this funny little car called a Honda CRX. And while most people who are into these cars are into them because they are a lightweight, small, handleable, or good handling chassis that you can fit a lot of different engines in, make a bunch of horsepower, go super fast. Woo. I'm into them for all kinds of different reasons. I have my case swapped one, which makes, you know, about 206 horsepower. Goes pretty fast for a CRX at least. Could be faster, but it's not bad. And you know, I've got this one, which we will get to at some point, which is bone stock, SI, whatever. And then also, we won't talk about this one, but this is my newest one. This is a 91 HF, originally from California. About 200,000 miles on it per the Carfax report. Pretty clean black interior. SI seat swap. A little bit of wear and tear to the bolsters, as most of them do have. A few other things, you know, swapped out of an SI, but mostly completely stock 91 SI. Now, most people like the HF chassis the most because Honda put a lot of effort into making this specific model of this chassis to be the absolute most bare bones lightweight chassis they possibly could. None of them have rear wipers, and therefore none of them have the little sprayer nozzle here for the rear wiper fluid either. Pretty sure they all came from the factory with this side view mirror delete plate because aerodynamics. I don't know if it's the same for 91s as it is for at least 88s, but there's a little piece right here underneath the quarter panel that like strengthens it. Pretty sure they started putting them on all models after 88, but if not, then that's a difference too, is that I think at least 89s don't have that either, because I guess extra weight is bad. There's also a little structural piece in here that bolts in behind here, and they don't have that either. I'm pretty sure that's an all model year thing. And you can tell that this is not an original steering wheel cover, because it's got a hole right here for where there would be a little lever to adjust the steering wheel, which these don't have because I guess that weighs too much extra. So they just took it out and they have a firmly mounted steering wheel. Plus this is an SI steering wheel, you can tell, because of 3-spoke. HFs only have 2-spoke because, again, saves weight. And there's a bunch of stuff like that in these cars that they went crazy with it to make these things have as low weight as possible. Like the front sway bar is hollow. There's no rear sway bar at all. The OEM wheels were Steelies from the factory. Like, I'm pretty sure like a even lighter weight Steely than regular Steelies either. They were literally 13-inch by 4.5-inch wide wheels. The front calipers are super small compared to all other models of CRX calipers, and they're the only ones that'll fit underneath those 13-inch wheels either. Like, just all kinds of stuff like that. They just shaved every single ounce they possibly could off of it. I'm pretty sure that the OEM HF antenna is even shorter than a DX or an SI antenna. That's how crazy they went with weight savings on these things. And I've always had a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for them for that. Also, I am a huge fan of getting great gas mileage on the highway. That car doesn't really get that great of gas mileage. This car won't get that great of gas mileage either. This car might get about 35, maybe upwards of 37-ish if you really baby it when it's done. These get somewhere EPA estimated 50 miles per gallon highway. According to most owners of them, they get more like 65. And I am a huge fan of that. So what I plan to do for this one, and this isn't going to be a huge crazy long build series or whatever, I am going to throw some paint on it because it does have a little bit of, you know, pitting on the front hood as you would expect these to have after having about 200,000 miles on them. A little bit of rust forming on the back of the hatch because people just nick this over time, over the years, opening, closing. Just going to recoat it real quick with some white. Not 100% sure which color of white I'm going to go with, but it's still going to be white because I don't want to go too crazy with this and have to repaint everything, right? But other than that, I'm going to be swapping in a bone stock 91 HF drivetrain in it. Now, I say bone stock 91, but realistically they're all pretty much exactly the same. But it's gonna have a D15 B6, I think is what the code is, with the OEM transmission, which is the main reason why these get such good gas mileage. The gearing is the gearing is ridiculous. I'm not allowed to say that on YouTube. But before I can do that, I have a little bit of an issue. Somebody got this car at some point in time and thought they were gonna make some kind of crazy cool, super clean engine bay, and they did it about halfway and just stopped. So now I have a little bit of a mess I need to clean up, but I'm not going to waste too much time on this. I'm going to just grind all this body filler off, get all the rust treated, scuff everything down, recoat the engine bay, and then we're going to drop an engine into this thing. And again, it's going to be bone stock. I even have the catalytic converter that came with this thing because they mounted it completely different from the SI or the DX model. It goes in the front of the engine instead of at the back. And that's why that exhaust tube is so long. Hello, bee in my face. Get out of here. As I was saying, all right, we're gonna knock that out. I'm gonna drop an engine in this thing. Got a few other things I'm gonna do along the way. But this thing even has a stock SI exhaust on it. I don't know why. Literally only the muffler portion of this is the SI, is an SI exhaust. The rest of it is HF. So I'm probably gonna swap out this muffler because I kind of want to save this for a different build. But I mean, yeah, even the exhaust is gonna be stock on this thing. Because while I do love, you know, 200 plus horsepower and a 2,000 pound car, I also love being able to get to work and back every day and spending next to nothing on gas, because I can just pass those day after day, because it only takes me a gallon to get 67 miles, hopefully. But with all that being said, first step is going to be recoating the engine bay. I want to get that knocked out because it's the worst part by far. It's got so much stuff I have to fix because people did some really bad welds on this engine bay, and I need to fix that. You really don't understand how loud cars are just in general until you live next to a highway. Anyway, I'm gonna get started on that now. All right, well, I got it down to the point where I'm ready to start work on grinding down the bay. Obviously got the subframe out and all the other random stuff out of the way. Pulled the exhaust off because it was going to be in the way too. I don't mess around with leaving the subframe in like some people do. I mean, you can just mask it off, but it leaves a little bit. You can't quite get to it. It just kind of gets in the way the whole time anyway. So I just pull that off, but got it on my little custom CRX front wheel bracket thing. So it can be rolled around now. I don't gotta worry about it sitting in one place on jacks with no front wheels. And yeah, ready to go ahead and get started work. But I'm gonna take a break first because, as you can probably imagine, I'm pretty tired. It's pretty hot outside today. Might get to actually working on it today. Might not. We'll see what happens. But same thing's gonna happen for you guys anyway. I'm just gonna work on it in the next 5 seconds anyway. pretty good progress for day one. Got the engine bay pretty much all free of rust. There's a few spots, mostly over here. I can't quite get to everything, so I guess I'm pretty tight to get in at all that Bondo down there. But overall, got most of the firewall done. My little mini sanding disc thing, whatever you want to call it. Everything else I got done mostly with the grinder with a wire wheel, so I do need to go back over everything I hit with a wire wheel with the mini sander. But I did run out of discs, used them all up down there. They go by pretty fast, unfortunately. Also, you also probably saw that I was getting started on the wheel wells. I figured as long as I'm working under here anyway, I may as well just go ahead and get these recoated, because they were looking pretty brown, and also there was some bits right around like the back here that were just chipping off anyway, so figured I'd go ahead and get that prepared for new undercoating. But I'm not going to go much further than this, honestly, because I got all the parts off that are chipping. Everything else seems really well adhered, so I'm just probably going to go over it with a wire wheel a little bit more, and then just you know, epoxy where it's bare metal, and then just a nice coating of truck bed liner or an actual undercoating, just to get it all back to weatherproof condition. Another thing is, all the places where the people had tried to shave the bay, see like all this stuff. Originally I was planning on just I was probably going to put some Bondo back over it anyway, just kind of cover up. I had to take off the last layer because it's been sitting like that for, as far as I know, at least a year or two. And if you don't know about Bondo, it acts like a sponge, and it'll just soak up that water and let it sit on the metal. So had to take it off anyway, but I'm probably gonna put more on to cover this up. But I figure, seeing as there's so many holes that were deleted by the previous owner, luckily pretty much all of them aren't anything that I would use anyway, but because they're already doing that, and you know, I'm gonna have to Bondo it anyway, I think I'm actually gonna go ahead and try my hand at shaving this bay. I've never shaved a bay before. I did delete a few things on the firewall of my K-Swap CRX just because they were in the way and completely unnecessary anyway. But I've never really gone through the trouble of, like, you know, Bondoing over certain areas and smoothing them out, getting all these little spot weld things done. So you know, I'm in here anyway. It's not a whole lot of extra work. I think I'm gonna go ahead and do that, even though this is just gonna be a freaking bone stock HF with like 60 horsepower. I don't know, at least it'll look good. It'd be good practice for whenever I want to actually do a shave bay on something else though. But yeah, like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and call it a day here and get back to it tomorrow. Alright, well, my GoPro decided it didn't feel like working anymore, so not 100% sure what's going on with that. So if the rest of this video sucks in quality, I'm sorry about that. But anyway, I've been working on this thing for the past day or two, honestly. It's been kicking my butt, but I'm almost done with it. Got everything sanded down, pretty much every little nook and cranny that I could possibly get to. Ended up having to cut a few things out because some of the welds in here were just the worst welds I've ever seen, to be honest with you, and they were just not going to cut it. So I ended up just cutting out the holes and just leaving a hole there. But now I'm going to go ahead and put some, well, first of all, masking, and then I gotta do a little wipe down with some wax and grease remover. Then I'm gonna hit the whole thing with some epoxy primer, 1 or 2 coats, and then finish up with a couple coats of filler primer. And then I'm gonna let this thing sit for a couple days because it's probably gonna rain on Sunday. Today's Friday, and tomorrow I'm going on a road trip. It's gonna last the entire day, so gotta get this thing protected from the weather before I do that, so I don't gotta worry about it just rusting all back out again and having to be completely redone again. So gotta go ahead and knock that out, and then I'll get back to you after that. Alright, well, if you can ignore my busted window now, let's just say the masking tape wasn't exactly working for me. I got a little upset with it and started trying to smack it down, and in my defense, this broke way easier than it realistically should have. And you know, hot, angry, and yeah, whatever. But the engine bay is all covered in primer now. All I need to do to get it ready for the next stage is go over areas like this where it's kind of got these little, you know, like low spots and random spots from like where the people were trying to weld stuff shut and fill it in. Just gonna be filling that in with a little bit of Bondo, getting that sanded down smooth, getting everything else sanded down somewhat enough for another coat of primer to stick to it, because then I'm going to coat the whole engine bay in just one more layer of primer, just to have something to do a final sanding on with like some 400 to 600 grit. And then after I'm done with all of that, I'll be ready to put some actual paint on it and clear coat, and then we'll be done with the engine bay. I'm also going to be doing the T-bar while I'm at it, just because I may as well. I'm sure a lot of you have noticed this over here in the passenger side of the engine bay. In case y'all were wondering, the proper way to make a new hole in the firewall is not to use a hatchet or a chainsaw or a kitchen knife or whatever these people used to do this. And unfortunately, this is kind of keeping me from finishing things, because I can't really weld right here without pulling the entire dash off, because there's this foam insulation right behind it, and if I were to try to weld on that, it would light the whole car on fire. I'm not about to do that, so I'd have to pull the dash off, pull all the little AC boxes and stuff out of the way, so I could have this in the entirety of the foam insulation for the firewall off, and probably also pull out the whole cabin wire while I'm at it too. And it's a lot more work than I'm trying to get into, to be honest with you. So what I think I'm going to do for this is I'm probably going to end up sacrificing some of this foam, to be honest, but oh well, right? There's nothing behind this because the AC box itself is out of the way. Okay, I'm going to fix that. But anyway, yeah, so what I think I'm going to do for this, instead of cutting it out and welding in a patch panel, I'm going to cut it out with a hole saw. Probably not just a hole saw, probably more like a Christmas tree bit, whatever you want to call that, step bit, so that I can make a hole that's the total diameter of wherever this is. And I'm just going to get a grommet that'll match that size and just plug it. I know it's going to kind of look a little weird because it shouldn't be there in the first place, and it's going to be a big massive grommet when I've already gone through all the trouble of, you know, shaving for the most part the engine bay. But it's just, you know, it's not the kind of work I'm trying to put into a car that I'm really not trying to take to any like shows or anything like that. It's primarily going to be a driving car, so that's what I'm going to do to fix that. Just so you know, I'm not actually just ignoring it. I'm just kind of temporarily ignoring it for now because I just don't want to deal with it right this second. Okay, well, after several hours of sanding, filling, sanding, filling again, sanding again, I've finally finished getting this engine bay pretty much as shaved as I really wanna. So started off with some regular Bondo after sanding down the areas that I wanted to do with some 80 grit. Then I sanded down the actual Bondo itself with, or I should say, actual body filler itself with some 80 grit, followed by some 180 grit to smooth it out. Then covered up all the areas where there was still Bondo with some glazing putty. And then I hit that with some 180 followed by 220. The lower grits kind of just get the bulk off and shape it to the most part for what you want. And then the lower grits smooth it out more, get it ready for paint, or in this case primer. So what's next is I'm actually going to be seam sealing some of these areas right around here. This is a really tight spot. If you've never worked on a CRX engine bay, like this spot just sucks to get into with pretty much any tool. So I decided I wasn't going to try filling it in with Bondo. I was just going to go over with seam sealer where it needs it and call that area good. But everywhere else that was, you know, more accessible, filled in, got it all nice and, you know, flat, smooth. And now I just gotta hit it with some more epoxy primer, and then just a little bit of epoxy primer on the bare metal, and then filler primer and everything else. And then I'm gonna go back over everything with some 220 grit followed by some 320 grit into 400 grit and 600 grit to get everything smoothed out and ready for actual paint. Alright, I'm going to be pretty pressed for time tomorrow morning, so I don't want to do any explanation kind of videoing when I start tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and go over everything right about now that it's, you know, middle of the night and I'm getting everything prepped for tomorrow. So I've gone ahead and sanded everything down with up to 400 grit decided to stay out of 600 grit because I'm gonna use sealer, which can fill in up to 400 grit sandpaper. So I don't really need to worry about the 600 grit portion because it's just all gonna be filled in with sealer anyway. So got my seam sealer everywhere it needs to be. Over in the main areas where I didn't want to fill in, but I still needed the seams to be sealed. I put the hood on with the hood latches to get those lined up, so I know the hood is going to be how it's supposed to be, you know, with orientation and everything, with body lines and whatnot. You don't want to try to do that after the fact. And you don't want to put these on without seam sealing around them because their water will get underneath there and rust it out from underneath. So everything is completely prepped. T-bracket's up there. And literally first thing in the morning, because I work afternoons, so I'm gonna wake up, hit this thing with seam sealer, or hit this thing with sealer. After I just make sure to degrease everything, get some water on the ground, and then you know, paint and clear coat, and then I'll show you guys the final result. So, hopefully you can hear me over the street, but before I unveil the final results here, I just want to take a moment to say thanks for watching. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. Also, I wanted to say I have a new goal in mind for this car, because I was recently reminded by a certain Facebook post that there's an event coming up in about a month from now, just a little bit over. If you're a fan of these kind of cars, you've probably heard of something called Classic Hondas on the Dragon. It's a big meet in Neal's Gap / Tail of the Dragon over in Tennessee, North Carolina area. Happens every year. Took my HF CRX there last year. It was a blast. Had a great time. There's a video on that if you want to check it out. In any case, what as you can probably imagine I'm getting to is that I would like to finish this car and have it actually like painted, the windshield obviously, and engine completely done and everything driving, running, done, which honestly I think is doable before that date. So today is August 24th. And I'm actually planning a trip to visit family in California on the 28th of September, which gives me just a little more than a month, like I said, to get this finished and ready to make the trip from my house here in Virginia all the way to my house, or my parents / sister's houses in Tennessee, in order to drop it off there, catch a plane, go to California, come back. I'm gonna come back on the 6th, just a day early to get everything, make sure I'm ready to do everything. And I'm gonna head on down to Classic Hondas on the Dragon 8. And I definitely can't miss it this year, because this year the big thing is EF chassis Civics, which is CRXs mainly, like 2nd gen CRXs, I think technically 3rd or 4th gen Civic, I don't know, but EF chassis, kind of my thing. So definitely want to bring one, and I think the one that I'm literally just finishing right now would probably be the best thing to take. I'll take my K-swap one if I have to, but it is kind of not the most comfortable thing in the world to drive for that long. Last year hurt my back quite a bit, but I'll do what I have to. In any case, without further ado, Alright, so obviously I didn't just paint it. I went ahead and pretty much assembled the entire engine bay to the point that I think I could still put an engine into it without removing too much. I might decide to pull the whole radiator out of the way, and that would make things a whole heck of a lot easier. But to go over a few things, obviously I wasn't about to paint this thing and throw those rusty subframes back in place. So before I finished painting it, I took the time while some things were drying, things like that, and I completely resurfaced the front and rear engine bay subframes. I also repainted the torsion arms, whatever you want to call those, forget. I repainted the entire sway bar. I installed a brand new rear engine mount. I installed polyurethane bushings for the anti-sway bar as well as for the steering rack. And little things I haven't painted yet would be the lower and upper control arms. Upper control arms is basically because I don't really know if I'm sticking with those control arms. I'm not 100% sure if I plan on lowering the car later, so I didn't want to put a whole bunch of money into brand new, you know, components for the upper control arms. And luckily the ball joint, the boot, and the bushings for the upper control arms are all in really good shape, honestly. Like, I did have to swap out one of the rubber boots for the ball joint, but the ball joint play is very minimal and the bushings are in good shape, like I said. So I might potentially lower the car soon, so I wanted to hold off on that in case I need a camber kit. The lower control arms, on the other hand, I'm just waiting on bushings. I have another pair that I've already pressed the old bushings out of, painted and everything, and I'm literally just waiting on bushings. They're lost in the mail or something like that. So whenever they get here, I'm gonna install those. And then you may have noticed that I have AC lines, because despite the fact that this is going to be an HF model, which we're kind of known for not having AC lines, I decided that I have the parts, most of them at least. I have most of the parts, and I do kind of want to drive this thing year-round instead of just during like the colder months. So I decided, why not go ahead and just put it all in there while I have everything out of the way anyway. So I've just kind of put the lines in place. I got the AC dryer in place. It's kind of like a placeholder. I'm going to replace that with a new one. I'm also going to get a brand new condenser later on, probably before I'm finished with this thing, honestly, just to put it in place if nothing else. Honestly, the only thing that I really don't have is the compressor. I know, I'm very well aware of how expensive they are to get brand new. It's like 400 bucks plus shipping. You could go used, but it's kind of a gamble. So I honestly probably will just go with the new pump. But again, right now I'm airing towards getting this thing ready for winter, not for summer. So for now, I'm going to plug up the lines and just have everything in place. But at least I have all the components, except for, like I said, the pump. So I'll probably do a whole video on that once I get around to it, actually. And I am sticking with the stock HF intake box. I even have the little tube that goes over the radiator, and I do have the box for this right now. I have it out of place though, because something I'm running into an issue with is that all the holes they deleted on the frame are kind of giving me an issue with some things. Like, there's nothing to actually mount this box with. I'm just kind of leaving it in place. Luckily it's all rubber that kind of holds it where it goes, but it's supposed to have screws to hold it in place. I'm not too worried about that, but you know, grounds do technically have to be grounded. So I would, you know, drill a hole right here and put in some kind of a, probably do like a, what do you call it, a rib nut, and just attach it right there. But it won't reach that high, so I'm not sure if I want to try to extend these wires, or if maybe I want to just put it right here and hope it's not too visible or what. But I can't really put it on the inside because, I mean, I painted the inside and I really don't want to ruin that for one thing, but also where they weld this shut, there's some really thick metal and I don't have all that great at drill bits, so I might use that area. But I also kind of like to keep the engine bay as clean as possible, because despite the fact that it is mostly stock, I still would like it to be somewhat, you know, shaved and clean, obviously. And these are a huge problem with EF chassis Civics and CRXs. These rust out all the time. Luckily I got my hands on a couple that were in pretty good shape along the line, you know, collecting stuff, and I took them both to my friend who does powder coating work, and so this is one of two that I have that are basically rust free. Well, I mean, they are rust free, but like, they didn't have a whole lot of rust on them to begin with, and now they're also powder coated, so they're able to last. So I'll be able to use that and won't have to worry about it rusting out or even looking ugly in the meantime. Another issue is that the shock tower fuse box has nothing to mount to, so I might decide to relocate this inside the cabin. I'm not 100% sure yet. It would be a massive pain to have to do that because you've got all these wires that have to be stripped out of this wire, gone back in the cabin, and mount this inside. I'd also have to mount or relocate the wire that goes off the AC harness to plug in here. You know, all the negative terminal connections have to go to it somehow. Like, it's kind of a big pain. I'd really like to just keep it right here. I might honestly just try some double-sided tape and just sort of stick it in place for now and worry about that some other time. But for now, it's really not an issue. Let me go ahead and get this thing off the ground and show you the suspension real quick. All right, so check it out. Obviously, I replaced the brake rotors. The other ones were really rusty. And while I was at it, you know, while I was had everything apart, I completely repainted the actual steering knuckle itself. And I did something that I've always kind of wanted to do, but never really pulled the trigger on. I tried to, I don't know how you put it, I guess I just smoothed out all the roughness of the texture right here. There's no rhyme or reason to it. I mean, it takes a tiny little bit of weight off, but for the most part, I just wanted it to look a little bit cleaner and just kind of see how it'll work out if you got all that texture from the factory molding process. So that turned out pretty good. Obviously, like I said, the upper control arm is still all used components, just, you know, the best that I had in my collection of, you know, random parts. I'm sticking with the OEM suspension for now because I just kind of want to leave it stock ride height for now. I just kind of, you know, have a cruiser that isn't, you know, super bumpy and harsh to drive. And then I'm also kind of building this thing in the way that I think, you know, Honda would approve of, the way they intended this car to be as a gas saver. So I'm sticking with the OEM brakes. They're the smallest ones you can get for this car. They have, I'm sure they have plenty of stopping power for what it is, to be honest with you. Like, I don't plan on really driving this car super fast or anything and having to slam on my brakes. So new pads, new caliper. I think this is the one. No, this is, yeah, this is the brand new caliper. The other side, the right side, I couldn't find remanufactured calipers brand new anywhere, so I actually had to rebuild that one myself. And luckily, I'm pretty sure it's going to turn out just fine. And got, you know, cleaned it up real well, got all the rust off of it, soaked it in some solution to kind of clean up any of the internal parts that I couldn't get to for rust, and then you know, repainted it, put it all back together with new seals and stuff, and it has good I guess feedback. I don't know how, the way the piston feels, so I am confident that that will work just fine. And if not, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I'm even sticking with the OEM fender liners on this one, including the bottom one and the actual fender liners. If I can come across one, I'm even going to run the center one that almost no one has in their car anymore because it's all ripped off over time. These are a little ugly on the inside. I'm probably going to spray a little bit more undercoating onto them, like I did for the rest of the wheel, just to kind of clean it up, because yeah, kind of really offsets the actual wheel well there a bit. And then if you notice, when I had my fenders on this car, I did have JDM fender lights on it. I'm going to keep those because, I mean, there's holes in the fenders anyway, and I don't really feel like finding other fenders for it. But I'm also kind of an idiot because I was kind of just expecting everything these people did to this car to be kind of janky and unnecessary, and they had some random extensions here on each side that I just completely kind of went over my head of what they were. Well, those were the extensions to go over the fender liner to the fender light. So I'm gonna put those back on, but at the end of the day, I should have working fender lights, which would be kind of cool. You may have also noticed that there's quite a bit of gold in my engine bay. I recently found out through my guy that does the powder coating that he knows a guy who does zinc plating work on old hardware. So talked to him about that, brought him about 60 pounds of rusty bolts and just random hardware and stuff that I had laying around, and got it all zinc coated. So I have a pretty massive collection of just all this random stuff. I even got a few of these done, so this is all nice and fresh instead of the ugly rusty, you know, fading silver zinc coat that they had from factory. So this is kind of like a new standard I'm adopting in all my builds now that I have the means to do it. Is just all not brand new hardware, but you know, clean zinc coated hardware that's not just going to look hideous on top of perfect fresh paint. But with all that said, gonna go ahead and end it here. I think I've said plenty about, you know, one engine bay in particular, and so you guys are probably tired of listening to me for the day. So I'm gonna wrap this video up. In the next one, we're gonna be taking a look at the engine for this thing, because obviously I got to get started on ripping that thing apart and getting it ready. But if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time.